All right, guys. So we're going to be talking about batch rendering for this new project. This project is going to be kind of interesting one. You guys will actually have a couple weeks to work on this. So if we take a look at the assignment sheet, you'll see that the batch render project, you guys are going to be basically creating a 5-second video, which is 120 frames that you will have to render out and composite. This will be a new scene created by you. You'll be including a camera move in the scene to slowly explore the space. So basically the camera can move slowly, or maybe turn or angle up or angle from one point to another. Um, the theme focus will be a time of day. You're going to be using lighting and color to illustrate the time of day and creating a scene to match that chosen time. So for example, maybe if you do one that's like late at night, you're going to be using a little light, a lot of blues, dark purples, things like that, and trying to create maybe like a moonlit scene, that illustrates something in the middle of the night. If you're doing morning, maybe you're going to be using light pinks, having the light coming in at a low angle, like it's just cresting over a, uh, over the horizon, um, and high noon, and maybe creating a scene, something like maybe like a Western scene or something, where the sun is coming, kind of like beating down on the characters or whatever's in your scene. So this scene, I'm going to allow you guys to use objects that you find in the out in the wild. You have to UV everything you find yourself, and you are required to texture everything you find, or everything you create. So if you have an object in there, it has to be textured. Okay, you can texture it using ZBrush. You can texture it using Substance Painter, or you can do Photoshop. So one of those options. You are going to be compositing your renders once you finish the batch render into a final composition in After Effects and export that as a H.264 compression format video, which will look like a .mp4 video file. So basically you're going to be putting these batch renders into After Effects, and then once you do a little bit of video editing, which I'll show you a video on later, you will be exporting this out as a video file for us to watch. You're also going to be putting sound with this video. The sound should help the scene that you're creating. It should go along with it. So I could imagine, like, full moonlit night, you have the scene, have like a wolf howling, or maybe you hear a hawk, hawk crying at high noon, or maybe a rooster crowing, or maybe you have some sort of ambient music, or maybe you have an alarm sound, whatever. This is something that you're going to be putting in there that is going to go along with your scene. These will be due on the 5th of October. I'm going to allow you guys, instead of doing 1920 by 1080 render format, you can go down to 720. The reason why I'm allowing this for this video is that it will significantly speed up your batch rendering, which usually slows down people's computers quite frequently. I want you guys to all understand this. Batch rendering takes time. If you guys have a scene, let's just do the math real quick. So we have 120 frames, and so that's the number of frames you have to do. Let's say that your 120 frames take 10 minutes each. That's going to be 1,200 minutes to do it completely. So if you divide that by 60, that is going to be 20 hours. 20 hours of rendering. All right? 20 hours of your computer being basically chewing through these scenes where you can't do anything else on that computer. You really can't. So you have the ability to come in and use our computers in the lab to render. I highly suggest you take that opportunity. Okay. Watch your render times. How do you know how long it takes for a frame to render? Well, what you do is you go into your Maya scenes folder. Let's go into one real quick. Let's see if I have one that I can show you. I don't think I have anything batch render for this one, but what we can do is go into images. Oh, maybe I do. So if you go into your Maya scenes folder, your images, and then we can go to your images folder. So wherever your images are sitting, you'll see you have a ton of frames in here. All right. So if we go to details, we'll see that it was taking about a minute a frame. And then at some point it actually got up to about 5 minutes a frame, 6 minutes a frame, something like that. So this is 200 frames, and it took me from, let's say, 5:18, 5 a.m. to 9:36. So it took me a couple hours to get all this rendered out. I have a feeling it actually took quite a bit longer than that, because I remember having to go back and redo some of this, but it can definitely take some time. 10 to 20 minutes a frame is not at all uncommon. Even longer than that is not at all uncommon. And the last film I was working on, Oni, I had 6 hours a frame. It happens. It depends a lot on how heavy your scene is, how much stuff you have in there to render. If you have things like reflections or shadows, all sorts of stuff can cause it to be really, really time consuming to render. One of my things that was very time consuming was volumetrics. I had a dust cloud in the cave that I was rendering, and it took me about 6 hours a frame just to have that dust cloud. When I took the dust cloud out, it was about 90 minutes a frame. So went from 6 hours to an hour and a half. That's pretty good. So anyway, make sure you're keeping an eye on how long it's taking. So you can take a look at this, see how long each frame takes. Say 7 to 8 right here. So that's about a minute. Minute times 200 minutes or so. So yeah, about an hour and 45 minutes, something like that. All right. So again, like I said, this is a project where every single object in your scene has to be textured. You need to be making texture maps, color maps, spec maps, bump maps for all of your objects. You can use the programs we've looked at before. And this has to last 5 seconds. And I'm talking a solid 5 seconds with 120 frames, not stretching 60 frames over 5 seconds. It has to be actually 120 frames. Okay, so let's talk about batch rendering. All right. So what you need to do, and hopefully you guys have been doing this because I know I've mentioned it before, is making your project folders. You have to make your project folders, especially if you're going to be batch rendering. You have got to do that. So just a little bit of review, batch folder or project folders, file. Let's do project window. We'll do a new project folder. I'm going to set this on my desktop. I'm going to give it a name, test. Click accept, and there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and create an object here. We'll do another object just like that. Okay. And let's go ahead and give you a shader. So let's do red. And we're going to do green for this one. And then we're going to go and do a ground plane. Now, through whatever means you want to do this, you have got to cover up the black void of Maya somehow. So you can do that in After Effects, or you can do that in your scene, but you have got to cover that up somehow. Okay, I don't want to look at a scene that is just completely black for no reason. All right, so let's go ahead and give this one let's do green, no, let's do blue. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and import a camera rig. So you guys will have the option to use this camera rig. It's a pretty nice camera rig. I really enjoy it. So I'm going to go to File, Import. And I'm actually going to drop this in the OneDrive for you guys. It's called CupCam. It's pretty simple. It'll say errors have occurred. It's fine. No errors have occurred. So it has a base plate right here that you can move around. It has a secondary control right here. It has a lift control. It has elevation control. It has a rotational control on the boom. You'll notice that the camera actually stays pointed in the direction you want it to when you do that. The camera itself has a tilt up and down. The camera has a zoom in and out. Actually, a boom length is what they refer to it as. You can rotate, and you can pan. Okay. Now the reason why I like to use these is because when you use a normal camera and you try to set multiple keys on it for it to animate, a lot of times you'll end up getting it flipping and doing really weird things. With this one, it makes it a whole lot easier for you to actually go in and create a nice camera move. Okay. So what we're going to do is go ahead and move it over here and do 120 frames. That's 5 seconds. So scale it up a little bit. So we're going to start off here, and let's actually split. And I'm going to switch over to the CupCam so I can actually see what we're looking at through that camera. I'll turn on my resolution gate, and I'm going to go and set my first key, and I'll set my last key. Set my first key. And set my last key. Set that key right there. So basically the camera's just going to be moving down towards the objects. So my animation keys are actually snapping a little bit. If you guys are in character animation, you'll probably remember those from blocking. So I need to go ahead and go to Windows, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. And I'm just going to go do a smooth interpolation for everything, or a flat. So it does something like this. Do a spline. How does that look? There we go. Okay. Okay. Let's go into a light. In this project, you guys are free to do outside environments if you want to, so don't be afraid to do that. Let's do environmental daylight. I'm gonna go and set the intensity up to 3. And let's just do a quick render, see what it looks like. So there we go. So that's the first frame. Next frame. There we go. So there you go. All right. So say that we got our texturing done, we got our lighting done, we're happy with everything. We need to go ahead and do our render settings so we can set up batch rendering. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to render settings, frame range, change it from current frame to animation, from 1 to 120. Really, whatever the frame range you want to render is what you're going to do. Renderable camera needs to be cup cam. Presets, that's going to be HD 720. Let's make our max samples something that looks good. Obviously, you guys will have to be running test renders through everything just to make sure it works. So your max samples are going to be different. And then that's basically the base setup right there. Once you are happy with that, you're going to go ahead and, actually, I'm going to go ahead and save this real quick. I'm going to name it test scene batch. And then I'm going to go to render man. And after I have everything set up, I'm going to go to batch render. Click continue. And then you're going to get a new window that pops up. And so this is called our local queue. So whenever you do a batch render, you're going to get a local queue that pops up. Now you'll see that I have the name of the scene, test scene batch.mb, status is active, completed tasks, 0 out of 26. And remember, I have 120 frames. So the 26 is actually, there's a couple of tasks that has to do at the very beginning and a couple at the very bottom, but then we're going to have a number of these tasks right here. These are actually about 5 frames each is what each one of these tasks is concerned with. So that's why we only have about 20 of those or 24 of those. Okay, you'll see status completed. If you click on the one that's active, you'll see what's happening. It's going through all the different stuff. If you have anything other than active or completed here, like if it says error, you can re-click and tell it to restart the command to see if it'll fix it. If it does keep saying error, click on this and then scroll through until where it starts giving you error messages. Sometimes those error messages are really easy to fix because you can go in, it could be simply a texture is not correctly connecting and you just need to go back and correct it. It could be a licensing issue. Maybe your license ran out, you need to renew it. It could be, especially if you were doing this in the lab, if every single computer is actually rendering, then it could be we may have run out of licenses. Sometimes a computer will actually run 2 licenses at once, and so we may end up trying to be calling for 21 licenses rather than 20. And so you need to look at this message and see if it tells us what the problem is. Okay. But once it gets done, it'll run through all of this. You'll see elapsed time, and it might take a couple hours to actually do all this. But this is basically batch rendering. At this point, just go ahead, let it do its thing. If you're curious, you can go in and check out your scene. So I go to desktop, test, images, and you'll see where it says test scene batch render, and you'll see the first image right here. So what you're going to want to do is, while this is rendering, you can go into After Effects and actually look at these as they're rendering. it'll take a little bit of time, but you can do that. And I highly recommend you check this uh, while it is still batch rendering, just in case something doesn't show up, which will happen. That is something that does happen sometimes. Objects just don't show, like they're just turned off, or your textures may not be connected properly, and so it's not showing the right texture, or whatever. I don't know. It's just there's weird stuff that happens when you batch render. So you guys have 120 frames, something that could take 20 hours to do. I know at least half of you guys are probably going to wait until Sunday night to try to start this. You need to make sure you're checking this as it goes along, just to make sure everything is going. Okay. So as it's going, what we can do is open up After Effects and check this. Yeah, I'm down here. Yeah, what's up? Okay, I'll be here. Okay, all right, bye. You'll notice that as you're batch rendering, your computer will slow down. Just in case you're wondering, you can go to your task manager, and it's probably maxing out right now. Yeah, 100% on the CPU. So just understand that will slow things down. So as After Effects is starting up, a number of you guys will probably run into an issue saying that like renderman renderer.xml or something is not found. That's basically, if you literally just Google that error message, you will see the solution for it. You have to copy and paste a XML file from one location to another location on your computer. It's a little bit different for a Mac, but that's basically the solution for it. Especially if you're on a PC, it's just literally just copy and paste. All right. After Effects does not like my thing. Okay. No, I don't. I can't really do anything about that right now. All right. So what we'll need to do is go and import the file or import the images. So I'm going to go to desktop. Let's do images, and I'm just going to go click on one of these. It doesn't really matter which one. I'm just going to click on one of these. It's going to make sure, we want this to make sure it says open EXR sequence. We just need to click on one of these. You do not need to select all of these, okay? Just one, even if it's still running. Click import. There we go. Now, our animations, since we're doing 120 frames for 5 seconds, that translates into 24 frames a second. So it's going to come in with an automatic frame rate of 30 frames a second. So that means it's actually going to run it at about 4 seconds instead of 5. So what we need to do is change this and change the interpretation to 24. Then I'm going to go ahead and make a new composition. I want to make it HD 720. Okay. Change the frame rate to 24. So this is going to be my composition. Click OK. And I can go ahead and bring my footage down. And you'll see we have our footage. So we can click through. And each of the frames looks good. So we're good. All right. So you'll notice that honestly, the let's take this off because that's just taking up too much effort. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and pause this real quick. Right click, stop command, and pause job. So that's going to free up a little bit more of our, free up a little bit more CPU for us to use for After Effects while we're doing this. So if we actually right click and tell it to reload, you'll see we get another frame in here. So we got 5 frames now. So there we go. So it looks good. All right. So that's batch rendering. You just let it go, let it have fun, and come and check in on it every once in a while. Okay. I'll make another video on exporting or finishing up and doing a little bit of coloring on here, as well as exporting out the final video. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay. All right. So I will talk to you guys later. Have a good weekend.